Why is everybody trying to come to America? Why are there no caravans going to Venezuela from the United States? They're all coming in the opposite direction because we have a rule of law here, at least most of the time. If we don't have a rule of law, you're not going to be able to maintain the kind of prosperity and freedom that we have here. We're blessed to live in America, but we need to recognize that it's impossible to have everyone live here. The best way to protect America and help people outside of our country is to regulate immigration at a sustainable level while exporting our ideas of economic, religious, and political liberty to other nations. We can't bring everyone to America, but we can offer to everyone the values and ideas that make America the greatest country on earth. Doesn't the Bible tell us to love our neighbor? Aren't immigrants our neighbor? So shouldn't we just let them come to the country? Shouldn't we open up our borders? Shouldn't we turn the other cheek? Wouldn't it be cruel to not allow people to come to the United States of America? These are some of the questions or statements that people might make. And we're going to look at the Bible to see what the Bible says about these things. Now, this is the second of two shows that we're doing on the Bible and immigration and borders and deportations. I covered 5 out of 10 points I wanted to make in the previous podcast. So if you want the complete picture, go back and listen to that. And I'll review briefly what we covered in the last show. And that is, first of all, everyone believes in borders. I won't go into detail here, but we covered it in the last program. That was the point 1 I needed to make. Even people who say that we ought to have open borders have a lock on their door. Why is that? Because they love people inside, not because they hate people outside. They realize this is a fallen world and borders are necessary. Secondly, God established national borders. We covered that in detail last time. He covers that in Deuteronomy 32 and also in Acts chapter 17. It essentially says that God creates the nations and God creates the borders. At least he did originally. Of course, borders have moved since then. But the essence here is that God is behind the idea that we ought to have borders, that we ought to have nations. And so it's something that is biblical to have borders and also to have walls and to have secure borders. The third point we made is that God established government and assigned the punishment of wrongdoers its primary responsibility. If a government doesn't punish wrongdoers, then who is it punishing? The innocent people. And government is necessary because we're fallen. As James Madison said, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. We need a government to protect innocent people from evil, and they do that partially by punishing wrongdoers. If you don't have a group punishing wrongdoers, you're going to have anarchy, and anarchy is awful for everyone. The fourth point we made, and this is where a lot of the confusion comes in, is that governments have different responsibilities than individuals. The Bible wisely has different commands for government than it has for individuals. It is not the government's role to turn the other cheek. It's not the government's role to forgive. The government's role is justice, to punish wrongdoers and protect innocent people from evil. It can't turn the other cheek. If it does that, the government is not doing what it ought to do, what God told it to do. And this is why there are different commands to individuals than there are to governments. And we pointed this out last week when we said, have you ever gotten a text from somebody and you're reading it going, what is this? And then you get another text right after that going, oh, sorry, that text not for you. Yeah. Well, there are texts in the Bible that are not for individuals. They're for governments. And there are texts in the Bible that are not for governments. They're for individuals. You got to know what the text is in order to apply it properly. And we went through the acronym that we talk about when we're trying to interpret the Bible rightly, the STOP acronym. Whenever you come across a passage, you've got to ask yourself, stop. What's the situation? That's what the S stands for. In other words, get the context. Then secondly, you have to look at the type of literature because you're going to interpret poetry, say differently than you do, say, law or parable or epistle or prophecy. They're different types of literature, and that'll dictate how you interpret a particular passage. The O in stop is who's the object of the passage. Is the object of the passage government? Is the object of the passage an individual? Is the object of the passage just ancient Israel? These are questions you have to ask to figure out how to apply, first of all, how to interpret, and then apply the passage properly. And then the P stands for, is this passage prescriptive or descriptive? Because not every description is a prescription. You know, the Bible describes that David committed adultery, but it's not a prescription for us to commit adultery, quite obviously. By the way, that's one of the arguments we make to show that the New Testament and even the Old Testament is telling the truth, because they put so many embarrassing details in the text, embarrassing stories even about their heroes, like David. He's an adulterer, a liar, and a murderer, yet he's also said to be after God's own heart. No people group would invent that their primary leader in the Old Testament, who is David, had these faults. This is why Dennis Prager famously said, one of the reasons I know the Old Testament is true is because no people group would ever invent such an embarrassing history of themselves. You don't see that in Egyptian history. In Egyptian history, and we just had a trip to Egypt recently, Egyptian history is propaganda about how great the Pharaoh is. And the newest Pharaoh is even better than the oldest Pharaoh or the previous Pharaoh. In fact, sometimes the pharaohs would etch out the names of previous pharaohs and put their name on the monument that the previous pharaoh built, because it was a propaganda campaign. It wasn't all about truth, but I digress. The main point here is that the government is supposed to have a different responsibility than an individual would have, and the Bible has different commands to different entities. And the fifth point that we made was that governments have a responsibility to their own people first. Just like Paul says about individuals, you have a responsibility to your family first. Paul says in 1 Timothy 5, if you don't take care of your family, you're worse than an unbeliever. And this is why we talked about Augustine's Order of Loves that Vice President J.D. Vance brought up when he had that trip to Europe back in February, that you're supposed to take care of your family first. Then individuals in your community, like your church, then your wider community, then your country, then the world. Don't go out trying to save the whales if you can't even save your own kid from starvation, right? You have responsibilities closer to you before you start worrying about things further outside of you. And this is why when people say, well, let's just open the borders, if a government just opens their borders, they're not taking care of the people they're supposed to be taking care of first, and that's their own citizens within their own jurisdiction. That's one of the reasons God set up different governments, because people tend to take care of people closer to them. And if the government is trying to take care of an area that's too big with too many people, it tends not to be as effective. The smaller the area, in many cases, the closer to the problem that people are, that a government is, the better it can take care of a situation. In fact, we had J. Warner Wallace on not long ago who said, I prefer local law enforcement than federal law enforcement, because local law enforcement, they may even know the people in their jurisdiction. They know how the streets operate. They know where the good areas and bad areas are. The feds don't necessarily know that. And so whatever government we're talking about, that government is responsible for people within their jurisdiction first. Then they can worry about things outside of their jurisdiction or people outside of their jurisdiction. All right, let's now move on to 5 more points we need to make in this controversial topic. It shouldn't be controversial. If we know our Bibles, it shouldn't be controversial, but sometimes people are pulling verses out of context and they don't know how they apply. So that's what we're trying to do here, is to look at the passages in context. And this is one that I learned actually from Wayne Grudem. We have an article from Wayne Grudem in the show notes. Dr. Wayne Grudem is a theologian at Phoenix Seminary. And this point number 6, says this: the Bible distinguishes between legal and illegal immigration. God told the Israelites to care for the sojourners. That's Deuteronomy 10:19. This doesn't mean, however, we should open our borders or ignore our immigration laws. Old Testament professor James Hoffmeyer shows that these sojourners, and that there's a certain Hebrew word for the sojourners, it's ger in English, G-E-R, were people who had entered Israel legally, but a foreigner who had entered illegally did not have recognized standing as a resident alien. So he was not considered a sojourner, but simply a foreigner. And that's a different Hebrew word. Nowhere does the Bible say that the illegal immigrant has a right to stay in a nation not their own. Every nation has the right and responsibility, I might add, to deny immigrants outright or select only the ones who will not harm their citizens but be a benefit to their community. That's why we have nations and immigration laws to begin with, because innocent people must be protected and not everyone can live in the same place. Charlie Kirk used to say this, and I think he was right, that assimilation, or let me put it another way, he didn't say it that way. He said, immigration without assimilation is an invasion. It's an invasion. In the United States, we should want people to come to this country who believe in our Constitution, not people who want to usurp our Constitution. And that's why we've spoken so much about Islam lately. And by the way, we're going to have the apostate prophet. Who's the apostate prophet? You'll find out. The apostate prophet is going to be on the podcast this coming Friday/Saturday. He is a convert from Islam. He's now a Christian. And for many years, he called himself the apostate prophet. You're not going to want to miss that. Those two podcasts. We're going to do one in the weekend podcast on the American Family Radio Network and other stations around the country. And then the midweek podcast next week will be part 2 with the apostate prophet. You don't want to miss that. But this is why we've been talking about Islam, because wherever Islam goes over 1,400 years, in the vast majority of cases, if not all cases, many of the freedoms that we enjoy here in America go away because Sharia law is put into place. That's not just a legislation of morality, that's a legislation of religion. Well, you know where the Christian morality from the Bible tracks with natural law, meaning it is consistent with what we intuitively know about right and wrong. However, the laws that come out of the Quran do not track with natural law in all cases. In some cases they do, but they take rights away from women. They take the freedom of speech away. They take the freedom of religion away. And the government imposes, therefore, a religion rather than just morality. You see, there's a difference between imposing religion and imposing morality. Morality is about our duty to one another, whereas religion is more about our duty to God. Of course, they're related, but you can legislate morality without legislating religion. For example, you can say you ought not murder someone without imposing on them the fact that they need to wear a burqa, or they need to go to a particular service, or they need to be part of a particular denomination. Telling people not to kill one another is legislating morality. Telling people that they have to wear a burqa or don't have the right to freedom of religion would be imposing religion on people, not just morality. So as Islam has shown itself over the past 1,400 years, it's not compatible with the United States Constitution. Now, again, this doesn't mean that every Muslim disagrees with the United States Constitution. It just so happens, however, to be a historical fact that whenever Islam gets a majority in a nation, normally freedoms go away. Freedoms that we all enjoy here in the United States. So if we continue to import people who do not agree with our Constitution and want to usurp it, at some point they just might usurp it. And then you no longer even have the right to preach or live the gospel. This is why we have to be politically engaged. If for no other reason, we have to protect our ability to preach and live the gospel. And of course, the other reason is because policy affects people, and we're supposed to love people. We're supposed to love our neighbors. So we should want to put laws in place that protect innocent people from evil, including our children. So the Bible distinguishes between legal and illegal immigrants. Now, I might also add that we're going into the Old Testament, and both sides of this debate are going to quote from the Old Testament. Technically, the Old Testament, everything from the Ten Commandments all the way to the end of Deuteronomy, they were just given to Israel. They're not binding now, except where the laws that are in those passages are repeated in the New Testament. And of course, 9 out of the 10 commandments are repeated in the New Testament. Keep holy the Sabbath is the only one that is not repeated. As my friend Charlie Kirk has made in his new book on the Sabbath is great for you, but it's not necessarily a obligation. I don't think it's an obligation. Charlie doesn't come down on either side. He just gives arguments from both sides, but he and I had conversations about it. It's not required, but it is a very good idea and a benefit to people to get off social media, to turn off the TV, to concentrate on God and your family at least one day a week. But in any event, I digress again. The main point here is that the Old Testament was for ancient Israel. There are moral principles in the Old Testament that we can apply today, but many of the passages in the Old Testament were just for ancient Israel. All right, number 7 on this issue of deportations, immigration, and borders is stopping illegal immigration protects innocent people from evil. The Bible teaches we should respect the laws of the governing authorities, which is what we've already covered in Romans 13. The lack of respect for immigration and border laws has enabled drug trafficking. In fact, this is just over the past 5 years, has enabled drug trafficking and thousands of deaths, child sex trafficking, and more than 300,000 missing children during the Biden years. And obviously also an infiltration of an unknown number of terrorists and gang members. It's also increased costs for taxpayers. It's resulted in lost jobs for citizens and the destruction of cities in certain areas. We had those destructive riots a few months ago. That's been inflicted on innocent people. There were riots, as you remember, in Los Angeles. These are people who are protesting the legal activity of the Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement Agency. In fact, I think that would add an end to that. They should call it the National Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement Agency. Then they would be called NICE. And who could be against NICE, right? Who's against NICE? Come on. No, they're just doing their jobs. Now, might they sometimes, like any law enforcement group, sometimes have bad apples? Of course. But that's not what many of the Democrats are protesting. They're actually protesting people who are carrying out the laws that the Congress and the president passed. So, obviously, it's not compassionate, although let me back up and point out that the main role of a government is not compassion. The main role of a government is justice. But for people who think open borders are compassionate, what you're leaving out is the fact that so many people are hurt by open borders. Not only people dying trying to get across the border, but child sex trafficking, as we pointed out, 300,000 missing children, infiltration of an unknown number of terrorists and gang members, drugs coming across the border. Over 100,000 Americans every year die from fentanyl overdoses that are coming in. These drugs are coming in across open borders. So while an open border policy may sound compassionate, it actually leads to disastrous results. That's because, like so many other utopian leftist ideas, this idea ignores reality and misdiagnoses human nature. People on the left often think human nature is essentially good. Well, if human nature is essentially good, then why do we need a government at all? As James Madison said, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. If we were angelic, if we were essentially good, we wouldn't even need a government. The reason we need a government is because we're bent toward evil. It's easy to be bad. It's hard to be good. So it's not compassionate to have open borders any more than it would be compassionate for you to leave your door open every night So anybody could come in and molest your kids or kidnap your kids. Borders are necessary in a fallen world. So illegal immigration protects innocent people. I should say it another way. It doesn't protect innocent people. It harms innocent people. Illegal immigration harms innocent people. Now, of course, you can find examples where it doesn't, but that's not the point. The overall point is it does. As we mentioned last time, Proverbs 17:15, he who justifies the wicked and he who condemns the righteous are both alike an abomination to the Lord. Yeah, if you are justifying law breaking, you're actually hurting people who are protected by those laws. In fact, as we said last week, the government's God-given role isn't therapeutic compassion or hugs, it's justice. Proverbs 18:5 says, it's not good to be partial to the wicked and so deprive the innocent of justice. Did you hear that? It's not good to be partial to the wicked and so deprive the innocent of justice. Yet we have people right now who are letting known criminals go without bail. Liberal DAs, Marxist mayors. When you do that, when you let the guilty and the violent off the hook, you're hurting the innocent. You are neglecting your proper role as someone who's supposed to punish wrongdoers and protect innocent people from evil. You're inverting that. It's not compassionate. It's hurting people. Even though you might be able to find some people who personally benefit from illegal immigration, that doesn't mean overall as a policy, it's the right thing to do. When you have laws that are not enforced, then people don't respect laws at all in many cases. So we have to enforce the laws that we have. All right, reason number 8, or point number 8. Unrestrained immigration would destroy any country. No country can accept everyone. In fact, it was Wayne Grudem in his article, which we'll put in the show notes, said that, I hope I can remember the figures properly, but if we opened our borders and say just 10% of the world decided to come to the United States, our population would more than triple overnight. More than triple. We'd go from, say, 330 million to like almost 1 billion people. Boom. How do you think that would work out? What would happen to our economy? What would happen to our infrastructure? What would happen to our values? What would happen to our Constitution? What would happen to your job? Anyway, let me complete the point. No country can accept everyone. As our country is suffering the negative effects of 4 years of open borders, notice that mass immigration is allowing Sharia law to overtake formerly free European countries because the political aspirations of Islam, as history attests, are not compatible with the Christian-born values of Western democracies. In fact, we're going to have, as I say, Apostate Prophet on soon. We're also going to have Peter Boghossian on soon. Who's Peter Boghossian? Peter Boghossian is an atheist who I've followed for a while because despite being an atheist, he does believe that he needs to do what he can to save Western values, to save Western civilization. And he and I were together at UC Berkeley with Rob Schneider back in November. And he's going to talk about the fact that it does not look good at all for Western Europe unless they change their immigration policies dramatically and export some people who do not share their values of democracy. So while, as I mentioned, there are many peaceful Muslims, a significant number of Muslims do not assimilate. And they don't share our values of freedom. And let me point out that the First Amendment protects religious expression, but not the kind of religious expression that would outlaw the First Amendment. In other words, the First Amendment is not a self-defeating amendment. It doesn't give one religion the freedom of religion to eradicate the freedom of religion for everybody else, but that's essentially what Islam wants to do. And we're not loving our neighbors if we allow evil to prevail or allow our laws and freedoms to be usurped. Not only are people getting hurt now, but future generations will do so as well. This is why Ben Franklin, who was asked right after the Constitutional Convention, "What kind of government have you given us, Mr. Franklin?" He said, "A republic, if you can keep it." The next statement I'll make was attributed to Edmund Burke, a British politician and statesman. I don't know if he actually said it, though. It's attributed to him, and it goes like this. "All that is necessary for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing." So Franklin says, if you can keep a republic, good. Burke is pointing out it's going to take some work. It's going to take good people to get involved. If you neglect your freedoms, they eventually will go away. So unrestrained immigration would destroy any country if the people don't assimilate to the values of that country. And unfortunately, many of the illegal immigrants who come to America and come to Europe do not assimilate. Point number 9, deportations resurrect respect for the law, which will protect people from evil. But let's be clear about this. While the Bible doesn't explicitly discuss deportations, it does mandate that wrongdoers should be punished, and it gives government the responsibility to do that. Now, as Christians, we can rightfully argue over what the punishment should be because the Bible does not require, nor does it prohibit, deporting illegal immigrants. It just gives a broad statement that you ought to enforce your laws, that you do not neglect the laws, because when you do, you're punishing innocent people. But it would be a gross dereliction of duty if the president and the people in charge of, essentially the president, but the people in charge of protecting innocent people from evil, if the president failed to deport violent criminals and those who have broken other laws. I mean, think about this. We incarcerate U.S. citizens who commit violent crimes, but many on the Democrat side want illegals who commit such crimes to run free. Isn't that crazy when you think about it? If a white guy or a average American committed a crime, a violent crime, the Democrats would throw the book at him. But if it's an illegal immigrant, somehow they want to let that guy go free. Why is that? Well, they're buying into the Marxist oppressed oppressor category. If the white guy is considered an oppressor, doesn't matter. Let's lock him up, regardless of what he's done. But if it's an illegal immigrant, that person's already oppressed, so let's go really light on them. This, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, is not going to lead to good results. You're not going to have a community, a common unity, if you're treating people unfairly. And the Bible even talks about that. Don't give favoritism to the rich or the poor. Treat everybody fairly. Yet we have an entire political party who seem to think that they can allow violent criminals to run the streets and we're not going to deport them. We're just going to keep releasing them when they get caught. That's a disaster. It just baffles me why people don't understand that their primary responsibility as someone in government is to punish wrongdoers and to protect innocent people from evil. And they don't want to do that. That's the number one priority. Now, personally, I think illegal immigrants, except for some extreme exceptions, should be deported and get in line behind those who do honor our laws. If we don't do that, we not only will we not only will have failed to respect the rule of law, but we've rewarded law breaking, which will have negative impacts across the board. I mean, if we just say to people, as long as you can get in, we won't prosecute you. We won't send you back. What's that going to do? That's just going to invite more and more illegal immigration. Yes, I think President Trump is correct to start with the most violent illegal immigrants and get them out of here. But that doesn't mean that the right thing to do then is to say, oh, as long as you've gotten in here and you're a law-abiding citizen, we should not deport you. We can debate that, but it sure seems like what you're doing is you're basically signaling that we're not going to do anything if you cross our borders illegally. What's that going to invite? Just more and more illegal immigration. So we have to have a rule of law. Now, a lot of people go, well, that's not compassionate. Again, the purpose of government is not compassion. The purpose of government is justice. And we have to pay attention to justice. Remember Jesus in Matthew 23? He's talking to the politicians of his day. And he says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You're tithing your spices, but you're neglecting the more important matters of the law. Justice, faithfulness. In fact, what are the three he gives? Maybe it's justice, mercy, faithfulness. Let's look it up. Matthew 23. Justice is the first because without justice, you got nothing else. 23:23. Justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Oh, he's got mercy right next to justice. Yes. Well, these weren't just politicians. They were also religious leaders. But as politicians, their number one responsibility was justice. That's what the government's supposed to do. If the government does not enforce justice, why do we even have a government? That's the point. Oh, Frank, that's so mean. No, it's mean not to punish wrongdoing. Because if you don't punish wrongdoing, innocent people are the ones that are paying rather than the guilty people. By the way, Jesus was often quite mean, especially when it came to the politicians of his day. He went after them because they had great responsibilities that they were not living up to, and people were getting hurt. All right, point number 10. America can help more people by maintaining our laws and freedoms. Look, we're blessed to live in America. If you don't think so, why don't you go visit some of the countries I've been to? I've been to Iran. I've been to Saudi Arabia. I've been to China. I've been to Jordan. I've been to Egypt. And some of you have traveled far more extensively than I have. Of course, I saw much of the world in the Navy, but I've also taken many biblical trips to different areas. I've been to Turkey, been to Greece, Italy, Germany, Switzerland. Switzerland's a great little country, but it's a little neutral country surrounded by the Alps. And they have lost their way when it comes to God. Been to several other countries. But some of the ones that I've been to recently, like Saudi Arabia, like Egypt, well, I like many of the people there. It's not a place, particularly Egypt. Of course, Saudi has all the oil. But Egypt, the average person in Egypt, the average worker makes $303 per month. Per month, $303. Most Americans, or a majority of Americans, make that in a day. And you're complaining about the United States? Of course, we can be better. No, there's no nation that's perfect because no people are perfect. We're all fallen. But if you really want to complain about something, go to some of these other countries. Go and try and do what you do in America in Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Iran or Jordan. You don't have the freedom of religion that you have here. You don't have the same opportunities you have here. Why is everybody trying to come to America? Why are there no caravans going to Venezuela from the United States? They're all coming in the opposite direction. Because we have a rule of law here, at least most of the time. If we don't have a rule of law, you're not going to be able to maintain the kind of prosperity and freedom that we have here. And I'm getting ahead of myself, but let me just get into it a little bit more. We're blessed to live in America, but we need to recognize that it's impossible to have everyone live here. The best way to protect America and help people outside of our country is to regulate immigration at a sustainable level while exporting our ideas of economic, religious, and political liberty to other nations. We can't bring everyone to America, but we can offer to everyone the values and ideas that make America the greatest country on earth. In fact, if it wasn't such a great country, we wouldn't have this immigration problem. There aren't masses of people trying to get into the socialist pits like Venezuela or Sharia-dominated countries like Iran. They need to secure their borders to keep their people from leaving. We need borders to keep people out. Look, people want to come to America for the freedom and prosperity we have here. This has become the land of opportunity and the most prosperous nation on earth, which would have been impossible without secure borders. Open borders would destroy the very reasons people want to come here in the first place. Why? Because prosperity can only be achieved when people feel secure enough economically and personally to take risks that innovate, invest, and extend themselves into the market. That security requires safe streets, reliable and adequate infrastructure, environmental protection, and a welfare base kept to a sustainable limit. Such security also requires the rule of law, which helps create a predictable and level playing field. Without the rule of law, you don't get the security and prosperity of America. You get the corruption and poverty of, say, Venezuela. Whereas of a couple of years ago, their annual inflation rate was 43,378%. 43,378%. We were reeling when the inflation rate was 7 or 9% here. Imagine 43,000% inflation rate. So people flee countries that don't have this unique combination of security and freedom. That's why the communist countries and the Sharia-dominated countries build walls to keep people in. We have to build walls to keep people out. Because if we don't, we're going to kill the golden goose that is the jewel of the world. In fact, we export a lot of foreign aid. Imagine if we couldn't do that. Imagine if we couldn't send missionaries anymore because we don't have the kind of prosperity here that would allow people to support missionaries. I mean, it's important to maintain the Constitution that we have here in America and to maintain the safety, the relative safety we've had, the relative predictability that we've had. So the Bible supports the idea that we should have borders and we should have immigration laws, and it allows deportations. That would be the enforcement of immigration laws. And when you don't enforce laws against lawbreakers, then what you do is you wind up hurting the law-abiding people, the innocent people. So let's just review 10 reasons or 10 points regarding the Bible, borders, and immigration. Number 1, everyone believes in borders. Number 2, God established national borders. Number 3, God established government and assigned the punishment of wrongdoers its primary responsibility. Number 4, governments have different responsibilities than individuals. Let me pause again. Turn the other cheek is not for governments. Punish wrongdoers is for governments. Number 5, governments have a responsibility to their own people first. Number 6, the Bible distinguishes between legal and illegal immigrants. Number 7, stopping illegal immigration protects innocent people from evil. Number 8, unrestrained immigration would destroy any country. Number 9, deportations resurrect respect for the law, which will protect innocent people from evil. And number 10, America can help more people by maintaining our laws and our freedoms, keeping immigration to a sustainable level, not a level that's going to overwhelm our system and destroy it. So there's a lot more we could say. We're going to put links to articles that I've done on this and Wayne Grudem has done on this in the show notes. I also want to mention that as we come here to the end of the year, that we do have a $300,000 matching gift. So any money you give to Cross-Examine up to $300,000 will be matched. If you give $10, it's $20. If you give $10,000, it's $20,000. You get the idea. And 100% of your donations go to ministry. 0% to buildings. We're completely virtual. As you know, we have a very busy schedule coming up in 2026. We have at least, there's 12 to 15 colleges already scheduled. There'll probably be more added. We're probably going to do some with TPUSA as well. We have to go to the most hostile real estate in America, and that is the college campus. We have to continue what Charlie was doing. And I've been doing this almost 20 years now. Charlie has been doing it over the past 5 or 6 years, but we've got to double our efforts because more people are interested in this now. Hearts are tender, and your donations help us do that because our security costs now that we didn't have before have made every college event basically from $5,000 cost to about a $15,000 cost. And so we need your help to do that. We're also spreading all over the world through all these new language websites or other language websites, and we're translating our material and other apologetic material from other apologists so the world can get answers to the truth about Christianity. So check all that out. Also see that we've got a couple of college courses, or online courses, I should say, coming up in January. We've got the Train Your Brain course. There's 2 tracks for that. There's one for 6th to 8th graders and one for adults. That's a logic course. My mentor, Dr. Norman Geisler, always used to say, if you had to teach kids anything first, teach them logic. Why? You need logic to understand anything, including the Bible. And instead of teaching kids how to think in the public school, we're teaching them what to feel, and that can be dangerous. You need to teach them the truth and how to think so they can make good decisions for themselves. Also, I'm teaching why I still don't have enough faith to be an atheist. That's our keystone course. And if you take the premium version, I'll be with you on 5 Zoom occasions for live Q&A on Zoom. So go to crossexamine.org, click on online courses. You will see all that there. Don't forget, we got Apostate Prophet coming up this particular weekend, and then he'll join us the following midweek podcast. Then we're going to have another guy on, Dr. Robert Gagnon, who is the top scholar in the world, I think, on the issue of the Bible and homosexuality. Frank, you're diving into these so controversial issues. Yeah, I know, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to help you think through the hardest issues of the day biblically, in addition to give you an evidence that Christianity is indeed true. We're supposed to present evidence for Christianity and cross-examine ideas against it. And there's a lot of ideas out in the culture that are against Christianity. And one of them is this so-called idea of sexual freedom and same-sex marriage and homosexuality and transgenderism and all this. Dr. Robert Gagnon is a biblical scholar. He's going to give us great insights and deal with some of the objections you hear that people bring up about these issues to the Bible. So you don't want to miss 2 shows there. Then we're going to have Dr. Peter Boghossian on, as I mentioned, an atheist who wrote a manual for creating atheists. We're going to talk a lot about saving Western civilization. We're also going to have a discussion on how he grounds morality as an atheist. You might be surprised to see what he says. So don't miss any of that coming up. Thank you again for all your support, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a difficult 3.5 months, as you can imagine, but I feel the prayers that you have sent my way and for our ministry as well. So thank you for all you've done. And thanks for also supporting our work. Couldn't do it without you. I mean, we're completely donor funded. So thank you for reaching people through us. Thank you for all you've done, especially at this difficult time with all that's happened since Charlie's murder. All right. In the end, as we all know, we're all going to win when we're on Team Jesus. So despite any difficulty we're going through now, despite any difficulty over the holidays, over Christmas and New Year's, Always remember your future is secure in Christ. And we have to keep an eternal perspective. As Paul says in 2 Corinthians 4, our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us a greater weight of glory. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, for what is seen is temporary. We fix our eyes on what is unseen. What is unseen is eternal. Eternity is coming. And at that point, every tear will be wiped away. There'll be no more pain, no more mourning, no more suffering. And we will see Jesus for who he is and enjoy him in the company of our loved ones forever. Thanks for being with us, friends. God bless.
If you're looking for solid answers to life's biggest questions, don't miss the latest episode of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeart, OnePlace, and Podchaser. Tune in, discover the truth, and share it with someone who needs it. Let's keep spreading the truth together.